Hey everybody, it is nice to be here at GeekGirlCon. Unfortunately, we couldn't be there in person, so we are recording a panel for y'all, and we're really excited to talk to you. We are talking Latinx in Gaming, You Belong Here, provided by ourselves, Latinx in Gaming, and some of the people we work with regularly. To start, my name is Cristina Amaya. I am president and co-founder of Latinx in Gaming. I am also director for the DreamHack Festivals. And I'm really excited to introduce my team. Up next, Elaine.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elaine Gómez. I am a co-founder of Latinx in Gaming and lead the charge on developer relations initiatives and things. And by day, I am a game designer, or rather now senior game designer at Brass Lion Entertainment. And that's kind of like where I do my crafts, really. So game design during the day and like all the DAI efforts every other time after that.
like a DE&I Batman almost. Awesome. Giselle.
Hi, everyone. My name is Giselle. I am a moderator for Latinx in Gaming and narrative designer for Deck 9 Games.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Alhvi?
Hello, everyone. My name is Alhvi Balcarcel. I'm a game developer from Guatemala. I'm the country lead for Guatemala and Latinx in Gaming, and I'm also one of the co-founders of the Guatemalan game developer community, Game DevGT. I'm glad to be here today.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. So I think to start, I want to ask the question of how did you get into the gaming and what made you kind of decide on your path in the gaming industry? I think let's start with Alhvi.
Okay. Since I was little, I always wanted to, always was interested in science and technology. So when I learned about computers, I fell in love with them. I wanted to be a hacker or make video games, and I still want to do the same. So in my country, there weren't careers specialized in game development. So I studied computer science. And after that, I started learning game programming on my own, and was fortunate enough to meet the like-minded people, and we created our community, and that's how it has been going.
That is amazing. And you're just doing so much for the community. I think, Alhvi, I see you everywhere. Your last year's future class as well, which is great. Hopefully you can make it to the Game Awards, but that would be really, really cool. Thank you for sharing. Giselle, you next.
So I feel like, I had a sort of different path for the game industry than I think a few people. I feel like the typical thing is like you've wanted to be a game dev all of your life. But for me, I really wanted to be a writer. I loved stories when I was younger. But my parents didn't think that it was the most practical thing to go to college for. So I went to a tech institute as a sort of compromise to them. So that I could get like the writing that I wanted and they could get something more practical like computer science. And that kind of led me into a game design path in the school that I was in. Just really, I had a lot of friends in my college who were already going that path. I was in a completely different major that I think for animation, I was like, that's not what I thought this was. And just landed in games and found a passion for it while I was there.
That's amazing. I know how it feels to have to compromise on your career path for your parents. Everyone nods. Yeah. Elaine, you next.
Yeah, I can piggyback off of that for sure. So I wouldn't say it was to my parents' disappointment that I became a game developer because they're proud now after understanding what it means, but they didn't understand it back then. So when I was a kid, I wanted to be a fashion designer. And I was so into Vogue and like Elle, and I would get catalogs back in the day in the 90s and like cut out all the cool clothes and make collages. And my best friend's mom was a fashion designer, and she was teaching me a little bit how to draw, like fashion draw, because it's a different type of drawing. And I remember sucking at it. And my mom telling me, you know what, Elaine, that's probably not a viable career. It's very competitive. It's cutthroat. You have to go to the States. And at the time I was, in Puerto Rico, and like there's no like big fashion houses in Puerto Rico or anything like that. So it was I was trying to figuring out like since I was a kid, like I am a creative and I knew that I wanted to do something creative, but I didn't know what to do with it, because to my parents, creativity meant not a stable job and not a good salary. So I compromised, much like Giselle, and I was like, all right, if y'all want me to go to university, I will sign up for something that's technology, but also a little bit interesting to me. And when I was a senior in high school, I got involved in our robotics team, and I learned a lot there, and I really enjoyed it. So I decided to pursue an engineering instead of just like comp sci or something like that. So I did biomedical engineering at first with a pre-med track to really go into medicine, because that's what my parents want to do. They're like, you want to be a doctor, you love caring about people, like it's a great job. And then I started it and I hated it. I hated the curriculum, and everybody was just so uppity. And I was like, I don't want to be around these people for like 8 years, 10 years, and I can't do this. So I had to sit down with my parents and disappoint them and be like, I really want to change careers. I want to change majors. I know that you don't want me to, but I have to do what's best for me, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be the one working that 9 to 5 or whatever it may be. And I want to be happy with what I decide to do with my life. So sure, they said yes, but try to figure out something that will have a good salary, right? So that's why I went into information technology. So I learned a lot of programming and things like that. But I did not stumble into game design until I was in my early 20s. I didn't even know until what D&D was, like Dungeons and Dragons, until I was 23 years old, because I just wasn't exposed to it. People around me didn't play board games or anything like that. So it was during like a research institute that I learned some game design at university, and did a whole project on gender roles in games at the time in 2012. And writing that paper was kind of like what motivated me to get into the industry. And I was like, wow, there's not a lot of women, and women are treated like garbage, both as players and like as professionals. Like, I want to make a difference. So writing that paper really changed my life. And from then on, it was like, well, I want to be the change that I want to see. And then ended up enrolling in school and like learning how to make games, and then actually becoming a game designer. And here I am. But that was not a typical story. Like when I was little, I enjoyed games, but I never thought like I want to make games. That wasn't something in my radar at all.
Yeah, I think same, right? Like you never like I would watch E3 or like G4 and stuff or whatever it was on, but there were never Latinos, right? There was never me on stage. So I was like, that job belongs to somebody else. It's not for me. And it actually took somebody being like, you can work in the industry if you want to, for me to realize it was a career. But I didn't think in college there's no degree at the time, right? And I'm aging myself, but whatever. Like there was no degree at the time for gaming. There was no set path. It didn't look like it made money. Like nobody really knew, right? And to everybody's point, like my parents were like, you're supposed to be studying politics. That's what we sent you to college for. And I didn't. So I did, but I didn't do anything with it. So I feel you. I think that's the thing. And I wonder too if our culture doesn't really allow for us to find this a viable option. Not just, even now there's some people that are like, oh, my mom would never understand, right? We have college students saying that to us all the time. So I think, we're talking about our careers and kind of how we got here. What are some of the challenges that you face as a Latina, as a woman, as a person of color? Like, what are some of the things that really strike you as kind of difficult to deal with? And Giselle, I'll start with you.
Yeah. Few different things. So starting out, like when I was in school, I came in wanting to write, and it was the only creative writing path in the tech school. And a lot of the people that I was in school with were like, if you don't play games, then, should you really be changing into this major? If you don't play this specific game, should you really be here? And so there was definitely like a lot of gatekeeping, a lot of like, because I was going in the game writing track, and that I was in a school with a bunch of like people with like super high AP scores, which, you know, I had the same AP scores. This idea that because I was in the writing track, I was not as smart or talented as the other people who were going into programming or art. And then getting into the industry as a woman of color, there's definitely this expectation as a writer that if you are coming into the company, that you are there doubling as a diversity consultant. So you're not just writing the story, you're also checking the story to make sure that, you know, there's acceptable representation, which like is very important to me, to make sure that the characters are where I want them to be. And if there's anything problematic there, I'm going to speak up and say something regardless. But just that expectation, it's a little bit like I'm doing 2 jobs in one. And to get to a place during the first week, because that's just how most company policies are, right? You get all of the material for it. That's where you come across the problematic material. And there's always a question of, while I am here in this first week, I haven't gotten to know you yet. Is it going to be acceptable for me to speak up? Am I going to come across resistance while I'm speaking up and just hurting relationships that I haven't even made yet? It can be very scary, uncomfortable, and anxiety-inducing during the first week. And yeah, that's just honestly a drop in the bucket.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel like we've all had experiences, right? Where and everyone feel free to chime in. I think all of us have had experiences where I have to ask myself, is this the hill I want to die on? But it's not like a hill of like, oh, I don't like the font. It's like who I am, right? It's like they'll make a Hispanic joke or they'll say something mildly offensive or like kind of like, oh, well, you're Hispanic, right? You'll probably understand what like the Mexican community wants. And it's hard because I want these people to like me, but at the same time, is this my only option in the workforce? I recently actually had a young woman who I won't name ask me, you know, she had just gone from one job to another and she's like, I really want to work in gaming, but is my only options pick companies where I know my manager will have my back and that's it? Because I can't work at this company because they have racist issues, this company has Me Too issues, this company has that. And in her personal experience, having only been in the industry for 4 or 5 years, she's noticed just a lot of sexism, a lot of really derogatory comments, and she doesn't know if she wants to be here anymore. And that's hard. If anybody else wants to chime in, feel free. I know this is a sensitive one, so.
This is hard. I don't think I don't like to make my personal experience like the norms. Like what has happened to me happens to everybody. That's not the case. Everybody's experience is different. But I definitely have experienced a sense of just like being invalidated a lot. And that goes from like, you know, a meeting where like I'm not being heard or I'm like people are talking over me and not listening to what I have to say. To like literally being the only like woman of color at the studio, right? And having not to only advocate for myself and demand respect and for people not to talk down to me or yell at me or anything like that, but do it, like Giselle said, for everybody else who may be part of like the community that is going to be playing the game that I'm going to be making, or that will be exposed to it somehow, whether in a convention or a stream or whatever it may be. And bearing that much weight on your shoulders, it's just like everything is riding on you, and people are depending on you for things to be correct, for like, oh, this thing localized in Spanish to be correct. All these extra things that just go on without that I'm not getting paid for, but I'm expected to a certain extent to speak to. And that is all just not fair. So it's just that constant like struggle of doing more work than I should be doing because of who I am as a person. And also not being heard and being invalidated, even though I'm in the space and I was given that job, I was given that role for a reason. And sometimes that can feel like tokenism because some, execs or somebody needs to fill a quota and make a check on that box. But other times I do want to feel like I'm here because I worked really, really hard and have, overcome so much in my life where like I have what I need to be here just as much as anybody else. And that's a journey that we all go through. I know folks who have been in the industry 10, 15 years and they still feel like they don't belong. They still feel that their work is not enough. And it's because of that constant loop of invalidation where it's just like, oh, you're a woman of color, oh, you need to work 2 to 3 times harder. You need to like speak louder. And then when you speak louder, then you're the bad person because you have too much attitude, you're being problematic now, you're not easy to work with. And that's not the case because I'm bubbly and I'm really, really nice. But if you come across me and you yell at me in front of like a meeting of 20, I need to stand up for myself and let you know, hey, that's not okay. And maybe I don't feel safe enough to do it privately with you because I am not comfortable with you. I'd rather have people in front to hear what I have to say. And those things are scary. And that's it's tough to navigate that. But that also makes you strong. That's what makes us so strong. It's because we take it and we learn from it and we help other people going through it too, so that they can do better for themselves and create that domino effect.
Right. Like when you think about it too, like this industry was built as kind of a brotopia, which is a book I recommend reading if people have time. Brotopia is about tech, but I think so many of the situations are applicable here. And I think the problem is, right, when we apply for a job, what they're not telling us too is, by the way, you also have to apply, and think about yourself in the context of a person of color and how you're going to add in to a mostly white male environment, right? Because ultimately, like this environment, company culture is like, I used to like obsessively love that term. There were companies that I thought had the coolest cultures and they gamed all the time together and they stayed late and they like drank together. And now that I'm older, I'm like, whenever I hear company culture, I'm like, does that include diversity? Does that include sustainability? Does that include real conversations? Because if your company culture is just like foosball tables, it's built around a specific subset of people. It's not built with me in mind. And I'm now worried that I am against company culture, which I've heard a lot about women of color. And it's such a shame because it's not that we don't fit your culture. It's that your culture is only for one group of people.
I wanted to add something that it's a challenge that we had here in Latin America specifically, that the gaming industry is really not as developed as in the States or in Europe. And we feel like sometimes we are not really in the real gaming industry, like we have our own like version of the gaming industry, but it's not the real one. When you ask like people, how did you get into the gaming industry, from people from Europe or from the States, they say things like, oh, I went like passing by and there was a company, AAA company, and they were hiring and I went there and they hired me. Or I went to Game Jam and I met some people and we created a game, and then we started working on that as a startup. But here, there are no companies, like you cannot go on the street and find a AAA gaming company. Like there are no things like that. And there were no game jams, no gaming related events until we decided to create our own community. So it's like there is nothing here if we don't do that ourselves. So it's like a different challenge. And that's why I'm thankful for Latinx in gaming, because I think it has been like a bridge to make us reach like the real gaming industry and have contacts in countries or other places where the gaming industry is more developed. And I think it's doing a huge difference for us.
And that's hard too. Like, I think something to speak is every single one of us is Latina, but we're all have different experiences. And the common root is it seems like there's a barrier to entry. And your barrier to entry, I hear it all the time, especially when we from Latinx in Gaming put on Conexión, which is our career fair. We'll have people from Latin America come, and so many companies will be like, oh, sorry, you don't have any jobs. So as a Latino, you're sitting there and there's 70 jobs offered on our career fair, but you can only apply to 2 and they're not what you specialize in. And that's hard, right? Like that's also difficult in and of itself, not to mention the other difficulties you have there as well. So I feel for you. I know that that's really tough, and there has to be more that the gaming industry can do to make it an inclusive environment, an environment where you can work remotely. I feel like we've proven in the pandemic that you can work anywhere, right? Like I think that there's very few jobs that need you to be on site. And for some people, it's healthier to be on site. But I'm personally, this is my office, and I'm pretty happy. So we're talking a lot about like the struggles, the problems that we face, etc. I want to spin it a little and ask, how has your Latinidad, being a Latino, how has that helped you? And Elaine, you kind of touched on it, right? How has that really helped you in this industry? And how has that helped you grow, and how has that helped you overcome kind of the difficulties that we face? Elaine, you go first.
Yeah, of course. I think for me, and this is personally for me, and it may not be the experience of like every single Latino in the whole wide world. But one thing I know that connects us a lot is like we are hardworking people. It's just like in our DNA. Like we want to persevere, we want to overcome, we want to work hard for the things that we have. And often it's to pay it forward so that we can help our families, we can help our loved ones, etc. And that has been my constant, like throughout my entire career. It's like, how can I be better at my craft, or a better version of myself than I was yesterday, so that I can help my family or help my spouse or help my friends in whatever way, or help my community. And that has been something that has just been in my heart like the entire time. And it's that perseverance and being able to overcome and then be like, oh yes, now I have like tips that I can share with somebody who's maybe going through what I already went through or what I'm going through right now, and I can help them avoid heartbreak or avoid a struggle or avoid just a hard time, because they have the knowledge that they didn't have through what I went through, right? And that connectivity and that bridging the gap, like Alhvi was saying, it's not just like in the physical or or a location based or whatever. It's like a knowledge gaps or just resource gaps, financial gaps, where like maybe I can give somebody $20 to do something, and that will go a long way, right? So that's why with Latinx in gaming too, that's why I love doing like game jams and us having like prize pools where like, in the United States, $1,000 may not go a long way in the United States, but it can in Guatemala. And they can do so much more with that money and make it really have an impact in whatever it is that they are working on. So I love our resourcefulness. We always figure things out. When you tell me, no, you can't do that, I'm like, no, I can do it. I'll figure it out. It might take me some time, but I will make it happen. And that's one of the things that I love about just like where we come from and our heritage. That's just part of who we are. And we all implement it in different ways and we act on it differently. But it all stems from that, like our ancestors, like blood, sweat, and tears. And we're here because of them. So I think that's just like something that just connects us at a really like deep level. And I see y'all nodding, so I think that it makes sense. But it's so true, right? Like we're just a hardworking, persevering people. And I think that in the face of the negativity and like the invalidating and like all these pressures that we feel, we just smile and nod, look back 5 years from now and be like, dang, like I did that. Like I came a long way. And like Christina's like, look at Christina not being a director at DreamHack. Like 10 years from like looking back, Christina, you would have never thought, right? But you're like, wow, it was my perseverance and my hard work. And like, I should have given up, but I didn't. And that's all ingrained through us from our family, from like generations and our community. It's just who we are as a people. And that's something beautiful to celebrate. So yeah, Latinidad.
It's true. It's true. One thing, Colombia, back in the early 2000s, it was pretty bad, right? People were being kidnapped regularly. FARC was pretty active. I'm not getting into the politics now because I know a lot of people got a lot of opinions. But what I will say is that while things were really bad, Colombia actually polled as one of the happiest countries. So even though people had a lot of negative things happening, poverty, et cetera, they were still really happy to be Colombiano, and they were really proud of it, and they were proud of their music and their heritage and everything that has built Colombia into what it is. And I always stuck by that fact, and I always I admired it because I thought, my people still smile even though things aren't going okay. And being in the US, right, like I would look back at my family and everything they were struggling with, and I always wanted to be stronger for them, right? And not just them, but like my parents, like how you were saying, right? Like people persevered. Like the people here in the US, a lot of how we got here was painful. Like my grandparents faced racism, my parents faced racism, I still face racism, and it's hard, right? Like we shouldn't have to deal with. It's 2022. Like I thought we're supposed to be flying cars at this point, and we're still having these like absurd combos about who we are as people. But I think that through all of the hard treatments and the stuff that we have to go through, I do see us finding joy in gaming. It's another form of entertainment, and I love that about us. And I think that, sorry to get on my little pedestal, but I really love being a Latina. I'm really proud of it. And we're not perfect by any means. There's so much that we have to improve upon as Latinos, but I think it's great to be one.
I think for me, the strength is just community. It's being able to find you guys, my people, and just have people and friends and just to go through all of this with, to talk to like lift people, to lift each other up, and so that we could make all of these wonderful things happen, and to stay here for more than the average 5 years in game dev. Along with that, one of the things that it came up in one of the negatives, but it's also just something that I really love to do. It's like I'm here to tell our stories. Like I'm here to like be able to make characters and stories and like just the people that I wanted to see when I was growing up. Because you don't see a lot of Latinos or Afro-Latinos in media at all. I feel like there that's like joint in culture is something that you don't see every day, that a lot of people don't understand in general. And so like to be able to bring that sort of representation and my stories like into the forefront and into the our communities is something that I take a lot of joy in. I love being Afro-Puerto Rican, and I want to be able to share that with the world, and to just be able to be like different types of people, like show our rep in fantasy and sci-fi, and mystery and like whatever genres that come up. So, because like we're everywhere and we should be able to be everywhere.
For me, my strength has been my family. They always have supported me. And I'm here thanks to my mom and my dad. And they've done like everything to get us to get a university degree, to all my brothers and I. And yeah, I'm thankful for that. And I love being Guatemalan. I love being Latina. It's like I was born in the perfect place, the perfect country. I love everything, the food, the music, like my family. I love everything. And I think as many of our families have had their struggles, like in different ways. And I think that many of us are here thanks to the struggles they had and thanks to all the obstacles they've overcome. So I think we deserve to be here. Like, why not? Like, why everyone else can be in the gaming industry, or why everyone else can be creative or do things, and why should we like be blue collar workers all the time? It's not fair. We like we deserve to be here. Like, why not? We deserve to be here. And yeah, I think that everyone should like be able to pursue their dreams and not like, it doesn't matter where you were born or what family are you from or what country are you from and who is your family or where you're born. Like, you deserve to be able to pursue your dreams.
Oh, I want to cry on a panel. I can't do it. We do deserve to be here. Every single one of us, and anybody watching deserves to be in the gaming industry. As long as you intend no harm on anybody through your expression, I don't see why you can't belong here, right? And that's the thing too. Being Latina, Latin, Latinx, etc. It's complicated. You know, Giselle, you touched on it briefly, but like, colorism is a thing, right? Like, there is a lot of not seeing Afro Latinx people on TV. You know, they're not featured, even though they're such a major part of not just our community, but our heritage. Latino music wouldn't be what it is without our, you know, those beats coming from Africa and through the hard and horrible history that we have. At the end of the day, Latin America is built on a lot of bloody and shitty history, and we have to do our best to uplift our people now. That means all of our people. And again, I'm soapboxing, so I'm sorry, but I think it's really important that we see more people of color, we see more people representative of all genders, and we see people that, you know, might not traditionally fit. I think something that I notice a lot, and I know Elaine feels the same way, is gatekeeping. There is a lot of gatekeeping within our community. Whenever Latinx in gaming tweets like, we're doing a giveaway for a computer, we'll have at least 50 like comments being like, Latinx isn't a real word or something. And there's comments on all sides about what that word might mean, and I don't want to get too much into it, but I do want to say that you can express yourself how you want, but what I and Elaine, and I'm sure everyone else on this call will not tolerate, is harassment. If somebody wants to be called Latinx and that term resonates with them, let them use it. They're not hurting you, right? So I want to open up the floor to talk a little bit about gatekeeping. How do you feel gatekept within the Latino community? And kind of what have you done, or what steps do you think people should take to kind of move past being gatekept?
Within the Latino community specifically, yeah, there is, if you don't speak Spanish, or if you don't speak a lot of Spanish, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, then you're not Latino. I do not speak a lot of Spanish. I'm working on it. But like, yeah, that shouldn't be a reason to like deny me from the community. Especially given the history.
Yeah.
Yeah, just, and if you're living in America, you are just you're not allowed to speak other language is besides English. It like you are completely just harassed or swept under the rug if you speak another language. So just from our parents' generation, it was always English, 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 and sometimes you don't get to learn Spanish because our parents' generation is trying to protect us from the things that they face. And that's why a lot of people in our community don't speak Spanish. So why add to that? And the other thing is colorism. I am Afro-Latina. A lot of people don't seem to like understand that you can be both. Like not a lot of I guess teaching the history of how just like in Puerto Rico there were Taino indigenous people, and then Spain came in and brought the Spanish came and just murdered and killed a bunch of Taino people and brought African slaves along with them to Puerto Rico. So you can be Afro-Puerto Rican. You can be a whole mixture of the indigenous people who were there, the Africans who were brought to Puerto Rico. You could be ancestors from the Spanish who invaded. There are and that means that you can look literally any type of way and be Latino. And yeah, a lot of people, if you don't look a certain type of way, they won't think that you're Latino. Not knowing Spanish adds to it. And the darker skinned you are, the more racism that you face within your community. Don't tan too much in the sun. You gotta like trim those thick eyebrows. Your hair is you should get it straightened. It's too curly, too coily. And the more black features that you have, the more just gatekeeping and racism that you face within the community.
Yeah, and I think too, it's just a shame, right? It's a shame because we all face the same struggles. We all came over, to the using the US as an example for the stream, and not any one of us. I'm going to use the Cuban community as an example, and I'm going to use it as an example because my mother is Cuban. I was raised by a Cuban mom, Cuban grandma. Like I lived in Florida, very Cuban area, right? When everyone came over in the 1950s and 60s, and I feel like people forget this, they were treated horribly. My grandfather couldn't even eat food at the counter. They would kick him out. The same as they did, people of color. It's like insane. And my grandfather had blonde hair and blue eyes, but his accent gave him away. So then my mom, when she went to school in the 60s, my parents are older, but she did her best to learn an English accent, to get rid of, she dyed her hair blonde. She did what she could to not be as Latina as possible, right? And so then, and sorry, mom, to put you on blast, but to see people like my mother turn Republican and then be like, well, you got to come over legally and da 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 da. It's like, man, do I have whiplash, or did you just forget the struggles that we went through to get here? Love you, mom. But truly, I think we're forgetting our own people sometimes. And then, we don't want to let people into the exclusive club that, to be honest, we're not even in yet. The ones who voted for Trump of the Cuban population, bro, he'd throw you right back over the boat. I hate to say it, but it's true. You wouldn't be here. And so that's an example, right, from my memory, but I see it in our own communities where you'll see somebody like Cardi gets so much hate, and it's I just don't understand what we're hating on her for. And some of it is oftentimes racism. And then there's transphobia, like when Bad Bunny dressed up in a costume that was like Yo peleo sola, perreo sola, sorry, like that video, and the amount of hate and anger, etc., that Bad Bunny got for being feminine in that video from his own community was insane. I just think that we are limiting ourselves so much, and it's such a shame because all of us belong here. I see every single woman in this room as Latina as I am. There's not a question in my mind that we're all supposed to be here having this talk, and I'm really grateful to have this talk with y'all. But we have to stop gatekeeping each other. We can't, and this is not on you guys, but we have to stop gatekeeping each other. We have to do better by each other.
Definitely. And I think too in our community in general, it's like this idea that change is a terrible thing. Like you can't change the Spanish language by adding new words and new pronouns. That we cannot change our music, that we cannot change like our cuisine and the things that we eat and the musical artists that we listen to and all these things. This constant, the constant thing of like change is bad. Things should be the same as they were. It's so archaic. And it really comes from like our parents' generation of like just wanting to keep things like as they were for the familiarity of it all. And to me, that's just a concept that I don't understand. But I also come from like in my own trail of thought where like I want to break the mold. So like I am that Latina who's like fully like tattooed, and you don't see that in our community. When I go back to Puerto Rico, everybody just stares at me. And it's like, oh, you like your beautiful face and your beautiful skin, like you ruined yourself. Like people have told me that to my face with like no filter. And that's just the reality of what it is. Or being told like when I was dating a Jamaican guy back when I was younger, when my parents and my grandma would tell me like, don't get married, you're gonna ruin the blood. Like literally, like telling me not to date somebody out of the race. Right? But that's a real thing. And my grandmother is Dominican. She was Dominican, rest in peace, grandma. She passed away a few years ago. But my grandmother was dark, and she was the darkest out of all her siblings. And she hated her skin color. And she would always say, like, I'm fea, I'm ugly, I'm ugly. She would always say that. I'll be like, Grandma, why do you think you're ugly? And she said, because Dios me hizo negra. God made me black. And I would always have to be like, Grandma, you're beautiful. Like, I think you're beautiful. Like, I'm here. Like, are you telling me I'm ugly? Because I literally have your blood in my veins. Like, do you think I'm ugly? She'd be like, no, because you're light skinned. And it's that colorism idea. And I would always tell my grandmother, like, no, you were beautiful just as you are. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. So it's all these ideas, like even me, like being white passing. I have heard it. I have lived it. I have seen it with my family. My father is dark. My brothers are dark. My grandparents were dark, right? Everybody was different. And having to walk life, go to places and see that, see all of that is part of me now. It makes you very conscious. Like I know my privilege and I understand my privilege. And I need to step up when I see those things and protect my brothers and my sisters from my community when people are being unjust, when people are not willing to budge change and like not, for example, respect people's pronouns. How many times have y'all have heard when somebody says, I use they them pronouns, and like the old generation just starts laughing because they just don't get it. They're like, oh, so you're an it now. I have heard that so many times from our community of the elders who just don't get it. Right? So it's that this idea of like things need to be the same, that also needs to change. And we need to, yes, we need to love on like our grandparents and our parents, our aunts and uncles. Like we need to love those around us, but we also need to help them understand that we are not going to stand by them being ignorant or them wanting to keep things boxed in for the sake of their own comfortability, because that doesn't matter. You know, how you feel about what they, them pronouns or Latinx is, that has nothing to do with you, and it has everything to do with somebody else. So it's about letting it go, you know, and respecting the people who occupy the space around you and being comfortable with not having an ego, right? And having things be about you and being like me, but actually, you know, sitting down and letting another person speak and letting another person have their place.
To add that here also the resistance to change is very like a lot of people are like that. Like we are kind of very conservative because of our religion or because of our grandparents, because we want to like keep things all the same always, and that like limit us our possibilities to accept more people, more diverse people. And yeah, also there is something funny regarding like white passing Latinos here in Latin America. Like with the term of people of color, it's like they are like, am I people of color? Because I'm kind of white. And it's like they have had some privilege here because of the colorism or because of the racism here. Also, they know they have like privilege compared to other people, right? So it's like, should I apply to this scholarship that is for people of color, or shouldn't I? Like, it's kind of complicated. And also, here, for example, we have a big population of indigenous people, but we don't see indigenous people like in creative positions or making games or making art or making sciences. Like, very difficult. Like, opportunities are more limited for them. And I think like I'm mixed race. There are people that look like me and identify like indigenous people, but how I'm grown up is like I identify like a mixture of different races. So yeah, we need to have more representation of indigenous people, of the different types of people that made up Latinos.
Yeah, I think too, like I've heard that before from others, like, oh, I don't consider myself a people of color because in Latin America I'm white, right? And then they come here and they're like, oh, I got treated really shitty. And so it's kind of interesting to see some folks kind of, not gonna lie, get a taste of their own medicine, because I've been in Latin America and I've seen how colorism works down there, and classism and sexism. And I've unfortunately at a gaming event experienced some pretty heavy sexism from Latinos, and I was shocked. I think they thought I was just there for like eye candy, and I was like, no, I'm in charge of this event, but thank you. But it's hard because like we want so badly for our people to be like, like mi patria, mi corazón, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, like, we have a lot of problems within our own culture, and we can love who we are, but also acknowledge that we need to change, right? And like grow. Like I feel like if you're not constantly trying to grow and be better, not just for yourself, but for those around you, like what are you doing, right? Like, you're trying to be a better ally. That the point of it is to learn and to kind of occasionally get your ego bruised and told you said that wrong, or you misgendered me or whatever. And shoot, I'm sorry, grow from it, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's in Latin America, there is a resistance to what they feel is like American infringement. The other day, I was on a subreddit for women, and one of them had shared a Latinx History Month picture. And there was a Latina on there being like, that term Latinx was made by white people and it's infringed upon us. And somebody like way further down was like, actually, it was made by Puerto Ricans, and it's not infringed upon you. They made this after years of study at their university professors, et cetera, et cetera. But it took that long to get to the truth of it. And it's just so heavily like encased in this sort of lie of like, well, those Americanos are trying really hard to like take away your Latinidad. And it's like think of our history, right? Like, we are literally a group of people conquesting each other all the time. Like, we have no place to talk about how we're, trying to preserve the sacred, ¿qué? Los españoles? Like, España, like that's what we're trying to preserve, because that's not who we are. And if we're trying to say that that's who we are, we're taking away all of our history and everything that makes us Latinos.
So I like to think it's like we all have, or many people from Mexico and Central America, we all have, or through the Caribbean, family in the US. Like we have cousins in the US. We have aunts and uncles and everyone. And I like to imagine for those people that say like Latinx is not something that was made by something in America. That like I like try to tell them, think about it like you have cousins in the US, right? And what if they like identify as Latinx, or what if they like calling up this term? Like, wouldn't you tell that it's about you? It's about your cousins. It's about the people that are your family. So it's about you. Yeah, that is how I feel.
That makes total sense. And yeah, also the whole language argument. I'm sorry, we make up a ton of words all the time. Like, I see how we text on the WhatsApp group chats. I have to Google half of what we're saying when I'm talking to mis primos in Colombia. Like, I totally think language, the beauty of language is that it changes constantly and it is evolving as we evolve as people. And so trying to preserve ourselves also feels like such a, like, whatever. Like, bleh. So we have like 10 minutes left. So I kind of want to open up the floor to any thoughts, feelings, etc. Anything that anybody wants to express here.
I was going to add to the Latinx conversation and say that I think that that's also where a little bit of the like more gatekeeping comes in, right? Because I feel like the goalpost gets moved. Because it's like Latinx was made by white people, and you're like, well, no, because like Puerto Ricans made the term. And they'll be like, oh, but was it like mainland Puerto Ricans, or was it, you know, like actual Puerto Ricans? Do the people who made the term Latinx speak Spanish? Are the people who are using it, do they speak Spanish? Are they Americanized? Are they are they US Latinos, or are they specifically in the country? And so the goalpost keeps getting moved, and it's like, oh, so yeah, just like completely like removing a whole bunch of people's Latinidad in order to keep the status quo and make your point.
That's so true. That's so true. The goalpost does get moved all the time. And that, you know, and think about it. We talked earlier about how in the professional setting, we are constantly having to face specific things. So we get goalposts moved. I've definitely been there where I'm like, okay, in order to have a healthier work relationship, I should use more smileys. And they're like, oh, well, they still think you're aggressive. And I'm like, looking at my smiley-filled, joyous messaging, and I'm like, oh, so it's a me problem. It's who you think I am, right? And then we have that on one side, and then Latinidad on the other side. It's like we are sandwiched in by our identity and the how difficult it can be. And I think something to take away is that like these are hard conversations, but the beauty is that we're all having it together and we can all relate to each other. And we have community. Giselle mentioned it earlier. We have each other. We have Latinx in gaming. I know Alhvi runs her own community. Giselle, I know you're part of a ton of other great communities. Like we have the ability to lean on each other and to have conversations. And we're all in this room because we're open and willing to keep talking about all the difficult things that every single one of us faces.
I'd say as thoughts, I'm sorry, Christina.
No, go ahead.
I guess like last thoughts here, like listening to all of y'all speak, like one of the things that is very pressed on my heart is the way that folks can be allies when these things happen, and when you see the discourse online and you see people really getting just attacked, like straight up attacked for using, you know, either defending the term or using the term, identifying with the term. And like there's so many ways that you can be an ally. Like don't wait for a fellow Latino or Latinx to explain to you the term. Like also do your due diligence and like read about it, read where it came from, like find out for yourself why it's meaningful to people and why it's being used, so that then you can share that information out in your circles and you could really make a difference when these things happen, right? Because it's so unfair that we need to bear the banner ourselves to make the change within our community, when it's just like everybody should understand and know what is going on too. And that'll really help other folks outside of the community who may only read the, oh, Latinx is a white term, right? And then just go along with that. It will just help spread that information further, that that's not the case, right? But we're constantly having to champion things for ourselves and do our own DEI work constantly. And it's honestly exhausting. We can't do it by ourselves, and we need help. And the best way that you can do that is by also educating yourself and being passionate about, how communities are growing and how they are changing, and being an active agent there, and then allying with us when we need help. When people are attacking, when people are being disrespectful, you can step in and step up so that we're not just constantly having to pick ourselves up from the mud, dusting our knees, and then keep going, because it really is tough to have to do that all the time.
You have a right not to use the term, but you do not have a right to harass me for what I call myself.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah. And I'm not going to call you Latinx if you don't want to be. If you want Latina, Latino, Latin, whatever, like that's happy to do so. But, and I had this conversation with somebody recently who was like harassing our group. I like hit a point. I don't know what was wrong with me, but I was like, all right. And I like jumped into the DMs. Elaine was like in the background, like, no. But I was like, I feel like you got a lot of feelings. So let's chat. Like, tell me how you really feel. And they actually opened up and they were like, I've actually had a pretty bad week. And I was like, that sucks, but you shouldn't harass people just because your week sucks. But they also realized that like our group means well. I think a lot of people, when they see DE&I groups, are like, oh, I don't know about that. And I think they really have to kind of sit down and explore why these groups exist. Like Latinx in gaming exists because we didn't see ourselves, and we're still not there yet. So we're going to keep existing.
Exactly. Yeah. And what really stinks is seeing that on like a post about, we're giving away money for grants so that you could sign up for courses and you can upgrade your hardware and software. And it's like all of that just gets completely thrown out the window because you don't like the term personally, even though it really has no effect on your life whatsoever. It's just like you're really putting the spotlight on yourself. It speaks more about you as a person than it does about the group trying to mean well, right? And often, more often than not, there's like no reason why people are so like vicious with their discontent about the term. Like it really is rooted in like some just like nonsense. Really, it's just like, well, I don't like it, so because I don't like it, you can't use that word. And then I'm gonna find all these weird reasons why you shouldn't use the word. It's just like there's no valid reason why you should feel the need to express that under a post about a grant that is giving money away for people. Like it just doesn't make any sense. It's like, sometimes on Facebook nobody uses Facebook anymore, but sometimes I'll post a picture of like, I went on vacation with my significant other, here it is. And like some random family member that I haven't talked to in like 10 years is like, I left you a voicemail in your phone, please respond back. It's just like, what? Like, this is not what this was about.
Oh my God. I know this is like derailing. No, but seriously, my cousin, so I doubt any of my family watches this, but Carolina, if you're watching this, what the hell? So I was posting about how Puerto Rico, we were raising money for hurricane relief funds because they're really going through it. And she comments on the post on my Instagram story and she goes, I saw your parents, seems like they're doing really well. I was like, you could have just messaged me. Did you raise money for Puerto Rico? Did you donate? What the fuck? Sorry if the language isn't supposed to be bad, but anyways, just saying. Okay, thank you.
It just happens. I don't know. It happens. It's just weird. It's just like, why? This is the wrong place, wrong time.
I think the internet, especially people that have grown up on it, has given people the ability to not see us as people. Right? They just see Latinx in gaming as this like giant white dude in a sombrero. I don't know. And they just make fun of us. And then they're raised by like the quartering or like horrible other people and like, I forget, Jordan Peterson. And they see all that and they think that that's like what they should be. Or, they see people making fun of people, so that's what they do, and they forget that like people have real feelings and are real people, and so that's hard.
Yeah, and it's like not fun that we have this fight in our own community. Like we are all Latinos, Latinx, or whatever, but we are the same family, and we fight about something that doesn't matter. But yeah, I think we also is like we need to try to communicate with them in a way, like try to tell them that we mean good, that we have to find some common ground to discuss this. I don't know if it can be done, like because of how everything is on the internet. But we also need to recognize that within ourselves, within our culture, there is that resistance to change, and that limits us. And but we need to take the other point of view, try to learn what they mean, why is it happening, and try to comprehend different points of view. Right? So yeah, as somebody said, I heard it like I don't know where, but it said like racism is something that came with my family, and colorism is something that came with my family, and I need to identify that it's a part of me that I need to change, right? That it was part of my culture, part of my family, but I need to change this. And so I invite everyone that is saying like to question the things that you have learned and the things that you have are trying to reproduce by doing like harass people on the internet. Why are you doing that? Like why? Just question that and see if this is something that you need to change. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And while some people do truthfully not want Latinx because of language barriers and things like that, I do want to recognize that sometimes it can also be people using it as an excuse to hide behind their transphobia. And I just want to say that whether you prefer Latinx or Latine, trans Latinx people deserve to be in the community. You
Yes.
belong here. You deserve a love and community, and we accept you.
Yeah.
We see you.
Shucks. Okay, so we're at time, so I'm gonna have everybody do kind of like a last, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. I'll start with Alhvi. You go first.
Yeah, Giselle said everybody should be welcome. Everybody is welcome here in Latinx Game. So trans people, women, Indigenous people, and I don't know, I'm not going to list everyone, but everyone is welcome. We are all family. We share. We are different. We have different. Our cultures are different, but we share many things. And let's like be a family and be friends. Yeah.
Giselle.
I never know how to do outros. I guess I'll say hi again. My name's Giselle. I'm a narrative designer at Deck9, and you can follow me at Beware the Siren on Twitter. Have a great one.
I love the outro. It's great. Elaine.
I invite everybody to be part of the Latinx in gaming community. If you identify as Latinx, as like Latin heritage of some kind, we celebrate that our Latinidad is not a monolith. So we come in all different colors, religions, countries, perspectives, but our banner is to respect each other and create a community and space for each other. So I invite you to come join us. We have a Discord, we have Twitter, we have LinkedIn, we have Facebook, and we have Twitch too, that you can watch whenever it is that we have live things going on. But we really invite you. We welcome you all to join our community and be a part of what we're building. And then personally for me, if you would like to hear some game dev tweets or me yelling about injustices in the industry or such, or Puerto Rico hit news, you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is Chulatastic. And I will see you around in the interwebs.
Thanks, everybody. And once again, this is Latinx and Gaming You Belong Here panel for GeekGirlCon. Thank you for having us. I'm Cristina Amaya, president and co-founder of Latinx and Gaming. Thanks.
Thank you.